Hello and welcome to Absolute Trust Talk. I am Kirsten Howe, the host today, and I'm happy to be here. We have decided to record these episodes every 4 weeks rather than every 2 weeks. So it seems like it's been a long time since I've been with my audience, and I'm really happy to be here. And we are doing more and more special needs planning at Absolute Trust Counsel, and so we're trying to cover a lot of topics related to special needs planning and things that are helpful to our families with disabled children. And that's why we're having this topic today, which I'm very much looking forward to. So all children, including children with disabilities, are legally entitled in our country to a free education. Children with disabilities may need accommodations or additional services in order for them to be able to access that free education, and public schools are required to provide that. That is a federal law. Unfortunately, it's not always as easy as that to get the necessary accommodations and services. And so parents of children with disabilities often don't even know what to ask for, or even maybe that they can ask. And that's where our guest comes in. So my guest today, Kirsten Sabo, is an education consultant with the National Care Advisors. She's been working in this field for 20 years. She started out in a nursing program, but quickly realized that really she wanted to be in education. She's worked with children of all ages and abilities in the classroom, in the community, in home settings. Her experience has shown her how much of an impact a really effective educational team can have on a child's growth and development when everyone, parents, teachers, administrators, the student, is working toward a common goal. And it's Kirsten's mission to ensure that all students are treated equally and considered individually, regardless of any disability they may have. So she helps parents understand their rights, navigate through the process, and advocate for what their children need in their public education. Kirsten, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kirsten. I'm really happy to be here. I think it is such an important topic, and it's so critical that we reach so many of our families who are going through this. And I know your mission is special needs planning, and like you said, education is a major part of that, and the resources that are available through the public school system, but not so readily obtained all the time. So unfortunately, I thank you so much for having me and giving this platform to speak about what's out there and reach more of our families and students to make a difference.
Yeah, I think awareness is the number one step. If people don't know what they're entitled to, they're not going to get what they're entitled to. Right. Usually, it's not just going to happen. That tends to be the experience I've seen my clients having. So in your job as an education consultant, it's to help families get what their child needs in order to get that education. And they are entitled to that. So, but let's start with some basics, because not all of our listeners are as familiar with these concepts as you are, or even as familiar as I am. So what we need to understand, there are federal laws that created these rights. There is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. That's a really nice acronym, IDEA, which was originally acted in 1975. And it requires individuals with disabilities be provided free and appropriate public education that is tailored to their individual needs. And the lawyer in me says, I see all kinds of room for interpretation in that sentence. Yes. And that's kind of what we're talking about, I think, really. What do we mean by appropriate? What do we mean by individual needs? All of those terms are something that people could argue over. But let's focus on the practical. I want to walk through maybe a typical case even though we know there's no such thing.
Yes.
Every case is different. But the beginning of this hypothetical case is going to be a child is attending a public school and they are perceived to have a disability by someone. Someone says, I think this child has some kind of a disability. What would happen next?
Right. And that is a very good point, is that free and appropriate education. So appropriate leaves room for interpretation, but I really want to highlight that an education, they're entitled to an education. So the first part is somebody, like you mentioned, that they've been identified as having a disability or challenge. And the first step for anybody is enrolling in school, right? Please know that every student is entitled to an education, regardless of the severity or the nature of that disability that someone diagnoses them with. I cannot share how many times that a case has been brought to me and said they're non-educable. There's no sense enrolling them in school. Oh. Every child is entitled to an education. So we can't really stress that enough. Please go register your child. They can be educated.
That is such a good point, because I automatically started with, okay, the child is enrolled and now someone's saying they're disabled. But there are kids who never actually enroll in school because the family thinks, no, there's nothing for them there. And that is not true. You got to go enroll and find out what is there for you.
Absolutely. So you mentioned 1975 when the laws first started, right? And we could actually go back all the way to the 50s to say some things that influenced our federal education laws. We are talking about these rights that they're entitled to have been around for so long. Unfortunately, even this year, within the past few months, I have had professionals tell families, we don't know that they're able to be educated. So I do think, if you're not in the field, you're not dealing with it every day, not only are the families worried that they might not be able to go to school, but they're getting input from different trusted individuals that are giving them mixed messages. So all students can be educated. Enroll. If they're not enrolled, go enrolled. Once they are enrolled, then what we need to do is look at what type of services they need to be successful to access their education. So that piece right there is a guiding principle for what the school system, public education, builds their programming. What do they need to access their education? Access is the important word. So there's got to be some sort of assessment. Yes.
To figure out what they need. Okay.
Yes. So once they're enrolled, we're going to say can they access their education, or do we see a need to make a referral for special education services? And that is the assessment that you're talking about. Okay. So what we would do as a consultant, and I want to highlight that we are not lawyers or really, the word advocate is thrown around for us a lot, but typically when we go into a school system, we have to say, hey, we're consultants, because if we come in with any type of law backgrounds, the district is going to also want to bring their counsel. Oh. At National Care Advisors, I have no problem with that. So I've sat in many meetings with myself, and if they want to bring their counsel in to listen, normally what they see is that our approach is more to bring people together. So the counsel usually ends up being quiet during the process where we're talking about evaluations. But as our role as a consultant, that is what we can offer, is to help you walk through this process and make the referral for special education services. Once the referral is made, then what the team will do is convene and discuss what type of evaluations, do we need cognitive, intellectual, communicative, physical therapy, gross motor, fine motor, bring an occupational therapist. So what we would do is sit around a table and say, hey, we think there's a need here and a need here and a need here. And normally what we will do is bring medical documentation to that meeting to help prove that these are the diagnoses, these are the history of milestones that were met or not, and show that there may be a need here or an obstacle to accessing the education. The moment that the parents, guardians sign a consent to evaluate, then the time starts ticking. Now, it's different in all states, whether 60 calendar days, 60 school days, and we can work through that process to make it individualized and make sure the family is aware of when the specific timelines that the district has to abide by. We can help them through that. But as soon as they sign those consents to evaluate, the district is held responsible for doing those assessments and then reconvening with the family, guardians, parents, whoever, to review those results. And then at the end of that, they're provided with recommendations on whether or not they are eligible for special education services, not whether they're eligible for an education. We've already established that.
So the need to get a referral and then identify the areas that need to be assessed. And so there might be 5 things that need to happen, and the parents sign the consent to the assessments. Now the district has a limited time within which to complete those assessments and get back with the parents and discuss it with them.
Correct.
Did I understand that right? Okay.
Yes.
So then there's another meeting with the parents and the district and possibly their attorney and possibly you. If you're involved in that process, you would be there with the parents, helping them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then recommendations are made for services, accommodations, whatever is needed.
Right. So at that point, and a lot of times that's where we do support the family. They have been through a lot in the years with their child, right? And they're walking into a big room, sitting around a table with 10, 15, 20 people. And all of these experts in their field are telling their guardians about their child and what they do or do not need. That can become very overwhelming. Yeah. So that is also where a consultant helps. It's another person listening with the family from their point of view. So we sit around the table, and there are a lot of meetings through special education, which is good because it helps communication, right? And the more we communicate, the better off the child or the student is. So at that evaluation meeting, we'll go through and say whether the recommendation is to qualify for services. So qualify for PT, qualify for OT, qualify for specially designed instruction. Okay. Now, I say that those are big words, but that is what is needed for special education. Do they need specially designed instruction on an individual basis to access their education?
As opposed to participating in the general classroom environment.
Yes, with accommodations. Accommodations are not necessarily going to get you special education services under.
Right. So those are 2 different things. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and accommodations are great. And some students may just need accommodations. And that's another path, another plan, right? So at that evaluation meeting, it'll be just a yes or a no.
Got it.
And then from that, we will leave and schedule another meeting to develop a plan, an individualized education plan. That would be the next step. Yeah.
Okay. And then we call that an IEP for people in the audience who are somewhat familiar with this. Individualized education plan. Okay. So that gets developed jointly with the parents, or does the school district work on it and say, here, what do you think?
Excellent point. The parents are 100% a part of that IEP team. They are a part out of it. So what will happen is we leave the evaluation meeting. And again, there's a timeline for everybody to develop the plan, right? So I have sat in plenty of meetings where we do the evaluation and the IEP all at once. Personally, I do not recommend it. It is a very, very long meeting, and it does not allow time for discussion about the evaluation and then to take that away and to develop a cohesive plan. So I do strongly recommend doing them at two different points. Although,
break it into two.
Yeah, it requires more time and more meetings, but you usually end up with better results. So yes, the parents are absolutely a part of developing that plan. The school will send home questionnaires, things like that. There's a whole section on the IEP that is for parental concerns. So they give their input. Typically, the therapist will collaborate with the parents through phone calls, emails, things like that. And then when it's time to reconvene for that IEP meeting, everybody, we take those parental concerns, right? And we come with a draft of the plan. It's not a finalized plan. So then we sit around the table and talk about what is that really going to look like individualized for the child, for the student, so that they reach reasonable progress.
And that's the goal of the IEP, I think, well, correct me if I'm wrong, is to identify what we're working toward. You know, we know the student needs help here and here and here, and the goal is to get to this point, to accomplish this, or for the child to be able to do whatever it is. So the goals are stated in the IEP.
Correct. Yes. And part of that IEP, you know, we have the goals, we have all the accommodations, the specially designed instruction, we have the related services, such as the therapies that the student will need to access their education. And I do want to point out that this plan, this IEP, is for the student to access their education. I know I keep saying that, but so many students, individuals with these complex physical, cognitive, behavioral needs will most likely need the therapies in school and out of school. For a common example that I see is that if I have a student who has trouble going up and down the steps. He's in a school that's all one level. So he's not going to get the physical therapy to work on navigating steps because he doesn't need it to access his education where he is.
He would have to get that on his own,
right?
Apart from his education. That's not necessary for him to get educated. Okay.
Right. So
that's a very good point. That's a very good point, because you can imagine that people have a lot of needs. But here we're focused on what do you need to get an education.
Right.
Yeah.
And another piece, I don't want to get too far ahead, but part of the IEP is placement, right? So when we go through and we develop the individualized plan, we know everything they need. We've done the evaluations. We talk about their goals. We say they need this much speech therapy to help improve their communication skills or their language skills so that they can learn. Where is the best place for this student to get those services? And that's what brings us to the least restrictive environment.
Okay. And so that is a goal in putting together the whole IEP, is wherever services are needed, it needs to be the least restrictive environment. Okay.
Yes. And it's more than a goal. It is a requirement by federal law. Yeah. So the least restrictive is the child's neighborhood school. Kirsten, we don't want to be sending a child 2 hours away if we can get a program for them down the street. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen with students with special needs. I have a student with vision needs, and she was transitioning from elementary school to middle school. She had the most wonderful elementary school experience once we advocated for it and got all the services in place. And she made honor roll. Her mom was so happy. The staff really seemed in tune with all of her needs. We planned for her transition to the middle school. The middle school did not have the programming that she needed. Unfortunately, updated evaluations were also not completed. We were during the time of COVID.
Oh.
So they were not completed by the timeline that they were supposed to. And they placed her in general education with some push-in supports. This poor child was coming home having increased seizure activity because she wanted to do well, and she was struggling. She couldn't see things. She didn't have the proper equipment.
Right.
We helped them work through it. And can I tell you, we switched her halfway through the year with a team decision, and we had to follow the process. She, again, is making honor roll. Was sad that it is summer break, and just can't wait to get back to school because she's learning so much. When we get all of those pieces in place and have the appropriate placement, it is so critical to their success.
Okay. So something you said prompted this question. An IEP is created. How long is that effective, or how often is that reviewed and revised?
So it can be reviewed and amended every day of the year if we want to. A parent can call an IEP meeting as often as they would like. So please, parents all know that. It needs to be done at least annually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the parent doesn't have to initiate that. The school is supposed to, okay, it's been a year, we need to call another IEP meeting.
They are supposed to.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the parents need to kind of keep track of that. There's lots of things schools are supposed to do.
Right, exactly. And especially as we're coming out of the pandemic, unfortunately, some of our students with complex needs were not as quick to return to in-person learning, and they were getting services in the home or various, we adapted plans to meet their needs in that environment. Those students, which we have seen, is a lot of them have fallen through the cracks until their annual IEP comes up again. And then the school systems realize that they're out of compliance, either because we're involved, kind of knocking on their door saying what's happening. Unfortunately, I see a lot of parents who are just frustrated as well, so that's been a lot of work that we've been doing over the last year or two, is saying, hey, they need their annual review and we need to look at placement again.
Yeah, we need to get caught up and get back on track. Yeah, I'm sure that, the pandemic was hard for all of us, but you can imagine that for that population, it could be especially hard. Right. So the IEP has to be agreed upon by the parents?
Yes. So it needs to, that's a fine, So there are federal laws.
You said the parents can request a review of the IEP every day of the year if they choose to. So I guess somehow they've got to figure out a way for the parents to be at least satisfied.
Right. And
not loving it, but satisfied.
Yes. And, we need, what I approach my role is that the parents and the school systems need to have a longstanding relationship. We are there to help them ask those difficult questions and have those conversations. We don't want to fight just to fight. We want to set up a practical plan that helps the students make reasonable progress. I've never met a family that wants to hold an IEP meeting every day, but I have worked with plenty that want to have one every month. Something has changed. They're not getting communication. We've asked the physical therapist to send communication notes home, and that's not happening. My child has not been seen for speech therapy for 6 weeks. I've emailed and asked, I'm not getting any responses. So we will hold a meeting where all members come together and talk this out, right? And develop a plan and to make up for those missed sessions,
Right. Yeah. There's the plan, and then there's the implementation of the plan. And the parents have to be, aware that sometimes the plan and the implementation don't match, and they've got a right to say something about that.
Right, absolutely. So that is often a reason why we reconvene, is that what we decided that day at the IEP meeting is not what's happening in practice,
Really isn't
in
happening.
reality. So yes, parents do sign off. Most times when they're signing off on an IEP, it is for participation. And there are federal laws, and then it is left to the states to implement them. So we can talk individually, case by case, what different states are doing and how it applies to the individual. So if we unfortunately have some families that they don't agree, they're not going to sign, but the school is also responsible for implementing a plan. They might wait some states have 15 days and then they implement it. Parents may sign off sooner than that, may choose not to sign off on it. I have a case right now where we agree to the full IEP, but we don't agree to the transportation services. So we've been able to negotiate that as well. So the academic, the therapies, they're all in place, but we're rejecting for transportation
what
purposes.
They're suggesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the plan can go forward, but there's that piece that has to get worked out.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So talk to us about some services that could be included in an IEP that maybe people aren't aware of. I'm guessing that it's kind of a very wide range of things that someone, you might not think of it as something somebody needs in school.
And this could probably be multiple subsequent conversations, but
sure.
High level, the number one thing that pops into my head is nursing. So nursing, if an individual needs nursing services to access their education, it is the public school system to provide them.
Okay.
And they're allowed to ask to bill insurance, but the guardian is not required to give permission to bill insurance. So if they need nursing, the school district needs to contract with a nursing agency and fill that position. Okay. If they need one-to-one nursing. So, but nursing services, healthcare plans are absolutely part of an IEP if that is a need. Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't have thought of that, but you can, once you say it, you can imagine a child who has, an ongoing illness, a need for medical attention on a regular basis in order to participate in school. So the school has to hire a nurse.
Yes, they do. Yeah. And also that kind of segues into, whether it's medical, but also for behavioral. If I have plenty of students who elope, run right out of the classroom. I've had some run out of the classroom, out of the school, fall, cut their lip open. They needed a one-to-one behavioral assistant. So we can add that to the IEP. Yes.
Okay. So we spent a fair amount of time talking about getting the IEP in place and your role there, but obviously there is a role for you once the IEP is agreed upon in terms of helping make sure it's happening. You're still available to your clients to help them with that aspect.
100%. So once we get everything up and running, the year progresses. There's obviously the difference between the plan and reality, which we've already discussed. The students' needs change throughout the year. They age. Transition services are a big piece, switching from elementary school to middle school to high school, all of that, and planning for that. Summer programming, what they're eligible for, what they're not, what works for the family, what doesn't. I have students who are eligible for extended school year that summer programming, which is usually 4 to 6 weeks over the summer, which is a godsend to some families. And
Sure.
others say, no, we just want our child to enjoy summer and be with their family or go on vacations. But parents can be worried that they're going to be marked absent. We can work through that process. So on a side note, you can decline ESY and there's no penalty. You'll be fine for it. So yes,
that's a helpful little nugget there. I'm sure. Some families will be glad to hear that. Yeah.
So absolutely, we're available to help them walk through that process. And I sit there during all the IEP meetings and take notes and do all this stuff. And we refer back to them during the year when I get a phone call and say, hey, they're only receiving speech therapy in groups. Like, no, they're supposed to be receiving it twice a week individually in the therapy room. Let's work through that. What is happening? So absolutely, we're available as the year goes on.
Okay. So I got to go to our audience questions in a second, but I want to end our conversation maybe on a little more positive note. Can you tell us about a case where you helped a child get something from a school that was really a big deal for that child, and you're really proud of how that turned out?
For sure. So the first one who comes to mind is a young boy. He was in a local city school and he was trying it out. And unfortunately, the pandemic hit and he was home, grandparents or guardians, and he was just home. He was home, and we could see, the family could see how much that he had to offer, but the schools kept telling her, we don't have anybody. We don't have nursing. We don't have services. We have nobody. My company entered the picture, and I was able to not only get those services in place and help the grandmother ask those difficult questions, get him back into school, and have the district agree to send him to a private school and fund the tuition. He has top-notch equipment. He has compensatory services for all the time that was missed, and he's thriving, and I'm really happy to see him. He's in a wonderful school. So that's just, not only did we get him back, but I feel like we got him the best of the best.
Sometimes getting the free and appropriate education means they got to go to a different school because this school can't do it. Right. And that's what you did for that little boy. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'm going to give our audience a chance to ask some questions. Does the IEP continue on with the child to college?
Good question. It does not. So Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, covers students up until 12th grade. That being said, we have to look at what diploma track they're following. Some students are eligible to stay in school from 18 through 21. Again, it's changing some states, giving it a little extra time so we can look at that and navigate it if appropriate. But once a student graduates high school and leaves that environment, they are not, I'm going to say typically, they're not protected under IDEA. That being said, when an individual goes to college, we work with their Office of Student Services, whatever the college is going to be calling that, but they have these offices that help individuals with disability qualify for accommodations. And we help kind of bridge that gap between being entitled to something and qualifying for it. So in a short answer, yes, the IEP does not follow them, but the IEP can segue into additional support so that they can be successful.
Well, I guess, in this country, we are not entitled, nobody's entitled to a free college education. That's just not how we're set up. And so it kind of makes sense. But I think what you're saying is, depending on the college, you can oftentimes get what you need because you qualify for it, but not because they're required to give it to you. But colleges offer things like that.
Yes, absolutely. And don't forget, we're still protected under Americans with Disabilities Act, right?
Very true.
So that you still do have some protections when you go to college.
Very, very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Okay, this is one. Does a child with mental illness, such as anxiety, depression, do they get an IEP?
They can. It depends
It
through an
depends.
evaluation. Yes. How much is that affecting their access to their education? Do they need specially designed instruction to be able to be successful in the education setting? We would do that through the evaluation process, meeting with a school psychologist. What I do want to say is that typically, if a student with anxiety or something like that is going to be eligible, there are usually other mental health diagnoses that go along with it.
Right.
If that is not the case and they're not eligible, what I would recommend is going with something called a 504 plan. And that is a plan under a different law, federal law, that we can set up that gives the student accommodations, whether it is frequent breaks, time extended assignments, chunking material, decreasing assignments to show mastery and not having to do the repetitive math problems all the time. Smaller classes, we can sit down and work through the accommodations for those with mental health to get through them.
Got it. And that's
actually, real quick.
No,
I'm
go
working with somebody right now who is going through something similar and needed to stop school early so that they could go get the therapeutic interventions that they needed. We were able to get the proper documentation and freeze the grades so that they could do that.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Okay. So that is very interesting to me, and also it highlights the difference between special services and accommodations to enable the child to stay within the classroom in some fashion. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Thank you for that. And Kirsten, I just really want to thank you for being here today. I enjoyed talking to you and I learned a lot. I'm going to remind my listeners, my guest today has been Kirsten Sabo with National Care Advisors. She is an education consultant and she really knows her stuff. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Kirsten, for having me. It's been wonderful. I really appreciate it.
All right. And thank you all, my listeners, for being here with us. And I hope you got a lot out of this. It's a very important topic that impacts more and more families all the time, I think. At least that's been my sense from the clients that I talk to. And I am grateful for your continued viewership and listenership, and I look forward to connecting with you next time.
Of Absolute Trust Talk Live. If you enjoyed listening in, then don't forget to subscribe. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you may listen by searching Absolute Trust Talk. While you're there, we would also love for you to leave us a review. And then why not share your favorite episodes with family, friends, or colleagues too? You can find all of our shows and corresponding show notes by visiting absolutetrustcounsel.com. You'll also find a variety of other free resources, including our ebooks, videos, blogs, presentations, and more. If you need help with your estate planning or administration, we also offer a free discovery call to help get the process started. You can find more information on booking your session by visiting absolutetrustcounsel.com/scheduling. Don't forget to keep an eye out for our next live episode in 2 weeks. If you join us for the broadcast, you can submit questions during the show. But if not, don't worry. You can always get in touch with us by sending a quick message to info@absolutetrustcounsel.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you soon.